Hello and welcome to Just Onside. It's Friday. It's been a long week, certainly for me. I presume it's been a long week for you as well, Oates.
A very long week, I must say, coupled in with a couple of late night Champions League dates. So there's been short nights, a lot of work, very intense. Very, very grateful for the weekend, I must say. How about yourself?
Yeah, likewise. I mean, the last 2 weeks I've had busy weekends. There's been weddings at the weekend. I had a trip to London. I had a trip to Birmingham midweek as well for a food and drink show. So it's been
Oh,
quite
food and
exhausting.
drink.
It's
Food and
yeah,
drink. Do
yeah,
expand.
yeah.
Do expand.
It's suppliers, isn't it? Really, it's like it was at the NEC, so all the
Oh,
big
yeah.
suppliers were there. So is as a retailer, obviously, it's just sort of the done thing, isn't it? You've got to go see what's out there. A lot of the big players, but lots of obviously smaller suppliers as well. So it was a good do. Collected lots of freebies as you would do, but it's been quite intense, and I've been absolutely shattered. A man of me, a man of my vintage should be taking it easy, so I'm going to try and take it easy this weekend. I'm not sure whether the stress levels will be taking it easy because obviously it's a massive, massive weekend,
It
and
is.
that's a perfect segue into this weekend. I mean, Sky Sports often build up Sundays, Super Sundays, when it's at Crystal Palace and Wolves. But this is a proper Super Sunday. I mean, it's it's probably over the last few years one of the biggest games in the Premier League, and it is pivotal. I think we all know that it's a pivotal game, and it probably will decide where the league title goes. So I can't wait as a neutral. Obviously, you've got a vested interest, so I am really intrigued to find out how you feel. What do you think is going to happen during the game, and what sort of tactics are needed to overcome quite a resurgent Man City? And there is a final question as well, which I hope you can answer. If Arsenal are to lose and they end up sort of winning nothing this season, Arteta, does he have to go? So there's a lot to unpick and unpack there. So take it away, my friends. Firstly, I mean, in terms of the excitement levels, you must be absolutely looking forward to. I presume looking forward to it.
It is interesting, Ayub. You're right. Living in a country, I guess, far away from home, normally you'd be at work and there'd be a lot of kind of football discussions, wouldn't there, right now in the UK? You can imagine you're in April, it's a title race. It's the old water cooler conversation, right? So you're making a
Mm.
cup of tea and it's that conversation. What do you think? Oh, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about that. And it's normally what gets the juices going. Look, for the longest time, these kind of high leveraged situations are those that you sometimes, when they come around, you get in the pits of your stomach, you're thinking, oh, how's it going to be? It's a very tense situation. I mean, that's for fans. Imagine the players who partake in these kind of highly pressurized, much scrutinized situations. Some see it as, for sure, a very stressful situation. Some, the very best, see it as an opportunity to express themselves and define and kind of etch their names in glory forever. But I think for myself, being so far away, it's perhaps been good in some sense because football discussion is not necessarily the norm at work and what have you, and also work's incredibly busy. So it kind of is a welcome distraction to some extent. But I have found myself actually, even though heading into the game, Arsenal aren't in any rich vein of form. I think that's pretty clear. Stumbling through in midweek, which we'll perhaps just go over shortly. But it's clear that in a game like this, you might be a little bit worried and nervous and anxious and stressed and what have you. But I've very much throughout the week thought, again, that this is an opportunity for Arsenal to ultimately get one hand on the Premier League trophy. And at least that should be the messaging given to the players by Arteta. And I guess generally as a club as a whole. So for me, it represents an opportunity. You want to be part of these games. For the longest time, we've watched April, May games being played between Liverpool and Man City and Manchester United in Alex Ferguson's years, and even before then, Chelsea against United, United against others. So the fact that Arsenal are now part of, let's say, prime time, Ayub, is testament to the club, testament to the manager, a testament to the journey, those players, and what have you. The key is that when you get to these moments, you don't shy away. This is what you fought for. This is what you battled for, and Look, ultimately, and I'll just cover this and perhaps give you the floor in terms of just how it feels in the UK, and I'd be keen to hear what your thoughts are before we kick around the tactics and the rest of it. But as a overarching in terms of the kind of magnitude of the game, there's no getting away from it. There's a piece I think done by Sky Sports with Sky Sports or Premier League done with Erling Haaland, and he speaks about the same thing. He said, "Yeah, it's a final. It's let's not get away from it." I think the words he uses this. Let's be very honest. It was a final against Chelsea. This is very much a final. It's a game between the two best teams. So the magnitude of the game is apparent on all participants within the game itself. And this is the great thing about football, isn't it, Ayub? You kind of, maybe as a neutral, you kind of latch on half an hour early. You're maybe watching the kind of warm-ups, that feeling that you get when both clubs emerge from, or both teams emerge from the tunnel. There's a little bit of kind of goosebumps, isn't there, you? Because it's going to be built up. I often speak about the famous Monday night game when Vincent Kompany scores that header from a set piece past David De Gea. I remember the entire day, how I felt, the build up, the kind of magnitude of the goal. I still remember his celebration, the knee slide away to the left, pretty much where Gundogan celebrated when he scored against Villa. So it's forever etched in your mind, these moments when clubs have defined seasons and defined, and that was pretty much the start of a Man City run, wasn't it? Not that they won every single year, but this kind of era of uh, dominance in terms of, you'll always think of Manchester City when you think about this decade of winning. So look, it's a great opportunity from an Arsenal perspective. I don't think they're playing particularly well. I'm very much a reasonable soul when it comes to that. Yes, I'm a bit of a romantic and sentiment. There is room for sentiment in football, but I think right now they're just not playing well enough, and that's the bones of it. When I look at Man City very quickly, you ultimately, and I'll probably end it here, they're a better team than Arsenal right now in April as we speak. The 15 minutes that they played in the second half against Chelsea straight after half time was about as good a 15 minutes I've seen from a big team this season. And you can talk about Chelsea, but that first half was relatively equal. But Man City, I thought, poured it on. And I really enjoyed it. You might think, as an Arsenal fans, how? But I can appreciate and enjoy and respect the levels that they went up in that first 15 minutes after the second half, and you've got to doff your cap. So look, it's a worthy adversary. They are an incredible outfit early on this season. They were Haaland or bust. He's remade this team. Yes, they've spent a bit of money, but who hasn't? And they've forged a very good offensive unit. They've arguably got the most informed player in the league. You could argue in Ryan Shirky right now, who's creating all sorts of havoc, caused Arsenal a lot of issues as well. So yeah, I think it's a game between the two best teams. Are you incredible subplots with the managers involved, given that they've worked together and are relatively quite obviously friendly with one another. A lot of respect between the two teams, between the two managers, and it's built up to be, I think, an incredible occasion, I would say. I'm not sure how the game's going to pan out, but there's no doubt the heavy, palpable nature of the game in terms of its impact. It's going to feel quite, let's say, decisive in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, in terms of personal build-up, very much kind of looking forward to the opportunity, although perhaps a bit concerned about how the team's performing and some of the injury news. But again, these are the games that you fight for as a club to be a part of, to be part of this particular discussion and this particular matchup. So yeah, very much looking forward to it. How has, would you say, at least from your side, the build up been? Does it feel big in terms of, kind of friends and discussions and all the rest of it, or do you think it's perhaps not as huge as it has been in years past with between big teams?
I mean, surprisingly, it's been subdued. I mean, I must confess. I mean, at work, it's been a conversation occasionally, but it's not as much of a talking point as I would have expected. But certainly, if you look at the sports channels, they're ratcheting it up now. I mean, obviously,
Mm.
midweek there was football in midweek as well. So therefore, there's so much football that you obviously can't start on Monday talking about a game that's going to be played on Sunday when there's games in between, important games in between. But certainly now, if you sort of switch on, especially Sky Sports. every hour there will be a small segment either talking about the game or referring to the game on Sunday. For my part, it's something that I've certainly been scrolling sort of social media. I've been going on YouTube as well, just looking at various clips and going on and watching the Sky Sports channels as well, because I'm thoroughly excited. It's what you want as a sportsman. I've always, I mean, I've never been good enough. I mean, it's many of us aren't. I mean, in terms of how many make it to elite levels professional sport, it's a tiny percentage. Most of us are just observers, watchers. We participate, but at a very low level. So I've always had
Mm.
this huge admiration for those who make it, and then I've always wanted to be somebody, if I'd ever made it, to play in big important games, because that's what it's all about. I mean, this
Yep.
to me, it really should be. If this doesn't excite you as a football player, if this doesn't
Yeah.
excite you as a Manchester City, as an Arsenal player, then nothing ever will. You're in the wrong business. And it's these are wonderful sort of moments. This is where you want to you see the characters, you
Yep.
see the skill set, you see sort of who can navigate the noise, the pressures, the expectations, and I'm sort of intrigued again to look at how sort of Pep approaches. I mean, this is for him. This is something that he's done many occasions. For Arteta, I'm really interested to find out what his modus operandi is going to be, whether he's going to revert to type and play that sort of conservative football, or whether
Mm.
he's going to sort of go all gung ho. Now, because I suppose they've still got the advantage, I've got a very good feeling, or I've got a feeling that he's obviously sort of going to stick with what he knows best, to be sort of conservative, to be cautious. Uh, but I'm intrigued to find out what Pep's strategy is, whether
Mm.
it's going to go uh, for the jugular straight away, whether it's a waiting game, whether it's a patience, whether they'll do what they did probably against Chelsea, albeit I don't think that was by design, because I think they were just rusty in that first half. I think it probably obviously took that sort of second half for them to just really get going, and maybe sort of Pep sort of gave them a few words at half time. But it's an intriguing sort of contest between two sort of different approaches, and it's mouth watering. This is what top level sport is all about. It's sort of it's a contest within a contest. Obviously, you've
Yeah.
got sort of 18 other teams in this league, but now it's only between Manchester City and Arsenal. It just sort of it's building up to that Sunday. I think it's going to be a cracking game. Again, not sure whether it's going to be an expansive game, because I think maybe Arsenal perhaps will just be a little bit cautious. But
Yeah.
I hope the team that wins is the team that's bravest. Again, it goes back to what I believe sport should be, that it the spoil should always go to those who perhaps are on the front foot, because it sets a good example to people wanting to play sport. So that's the way, perhaps the best way to try and sort of succeed. But it's a cracking prospect. Uh, from sort of obviously from my position, I mean, obviously I'm sort of hoping that City sort of sneak it. Sort of what's sort of what do you think Arteta will be thinking? Do you think he'll just be thinking, right, we'll be cautious, or do you think really this is the time for him to maybe sort of throw away obviously his manual and just sort of say, right, it's sort of all or nothing, or do you think because he's still got that advantage that that will perhaps influence how he approaches the game?
It's a very good question, Ayub, because what Arteta has not solved when playing against Manchester City, yeah, is how to get through that four-man block at the front. It was interesting to see in the League Cup final the four players up front not necessarily press Arsenal, but simply close all the gaps into midfield and what have you. If you actually look at the gaps between City's front four and the middle two of Rodri and Bernardo Silva, it's actually quite large, because ultimately what Man City are banking on is that this cautious Arsenal team cannot play through us, and they've not got the players up front to kind of win the first ball, then win the second ball, then get at us. So there was actually kind of two games being played, so to speak. There was a block of players in, let's say, the Arsenal defensive third, essentially, and then you have these kind of for City a back four and a middle two dropping a bit deep for those second balls when inevitably Arsenal have to be forced to go along. Now Arteta didn't solve it, and those Arsenal players have not solved it. So that'll be very interesting to see. And you're right, you will Guardiola provide another wrinkle, thinking that, well, Arteta will most likely have some sort of plan for that, because it was obvious in the League Cup final, Arsenal had no answer to the tactics put forth by City. Now, they also were missing some key personnel, but in the end, a final is a final is a final, and you've got to find some solutions to be more offensively, let's say, kind of threatening, which Arsenal absolutely were not. Look, I just want a small thing tactically. I think if you watch the Liverpool FA Cup game, look, City are in incredible form. They've kept 3 clean sheets, at least that I'm aware of, on the bounce in 3 big games. League Cup final, they beat Liverpool, FA Cup, and Chelsea in a must-win game last week, but they've kept clean sheets. Now, when you look at how Liverpool started in that game in the FA Cup, they actually showed a little bit about how you can get at City. Now, they weren't, kind of dominant in any stretch, but I thought Liverpool were actually the better team until City got that penalty with the foul on O'Reilly. And the way they did it actually was where Curtis Jones actually drops in between the two defenders, which is something Arsenal don't do much of. They leave it to kind of Gabriel and Saliba split quite wide. And then what you saw was Salah and Wirtz, let's say, dropping in a little bit narrow either side of Bernardo and Rodri, forcing them in a bit to defend the kind of horizontal elements of the midfield. And you also saw Ekitike kind of dropping deep on Matheus Nunes, kind of keeping him occupied. And I just wonder if he would have looked at that Arteta and thought, if I see a 4-2-4 formation from City, is that how he's going to do it? Where he drops maybe one of Zubimendi in, and then asks Gyökeres perhaps to pull on one of the fullbacks. Now, look, what I would have liked to have seen, and you're probably going to laugh, I don't think this Arsenal team's playing well enough to have a decent chance. Just my humble opinion. If they were playing better, I'd feel differently. But I just don't think they're playing well enough. My eyes don't lie when I watch Arsenal right now. What I would have liked to have seen with this personnel, and I think there will be some personnel changes next season, which will make them more offensively threatening, and will have teams respect their transitions, because right now they're lacking considerable pace, I would say. What I would have liked to have seen, if everybody was fit, is a concoction up front, perhaps of Saka, Trossard, and Martinelli up front, because he hasn't tried it for the longest time. But I think you have to give City something else to think about. I think Gyökeres and even Havertz was perhaps a better link-up player than Gyökeres. I think that's meat and drink for Guehi, for Kusanov, and what have you. But when you know you're going to be at the Etihad and somewhat under the pump, I need to keep that defence honest. And I think having a player like Martinelli, who's not been great this season, believe you me, but where you play him up front, you take away some of the defensive responsibilities away from him, and you leave all of his energy and output, so to speak, for lots of vertical runs in behind. And he can do that. I think some people might look at it and think, well, he's not been that good this season. Agreed. But there's a difference playing on a wing where you've got a great deal of responsibility, and playing up front where you can conserve energy and you can make bursting runs. And I think you have to keep this City team honest. And I would have been very curious to see if Arteta threw a wrinkle like that, to say, you know what, I think this is the way to go. You have to, with City, you have to, given that they're going to be defending probably 5 yards inside of their own half, so to speak, to create situations where Eze perhaps on the kind of first pass can, play that kind of ball in behind quickly with the third man run. So that's the wrinkle I would have liked to have seen, because I don't think the others can threaten City. And I think that's a key thing with City. You've got to, as good as they are, they play for control. They play to be dominant. And I think you have to threaten them mentally, if that makes sense. You have to force them into believing that they can be got at, because I think that's half the battle. Right now, they're in a right groove. They're feeling super confident, and I just think their speed of play, their speed of thought, their intent, their attacking verve right now has looked very good for quite some time. Is it vintage Man City? Perhaps not, but is it a different Man City? I think so. Different personnel, different protagonists, but they're still a very watchable outfit right now, especially offensively. So I just think attacking wise, they've got much, much, much more of an advantage. There's talk, obviously, it would appear that Saka's going to miss games. I think he's been a disappointment this season. It's just a lot of games. He's not played well enough, at least not from a perspective of now he's being paid like a superstar as well. So I think that's going to cause some real problems, especially given Madueke, who's not at Saka's level, and to be honest with you, he's
Mm.
been very under par this season. You then question, well, what's he actually going to do on that side? Could he even maybe consider starting Max Dowmer, which would be a huge. You wouldn't want to go there, I don't think, not in a game of this particular magnitude, or at least at this stage. So, look, I think he's got it all to do Arteta. I think he will be relatively cautious, to be fair, as he should be in the first 10 minutes. I think the game needs to settle down for Arsenal, so to speak. But there is no doubt, you that they are going to have to increase their offensive output just in terms of threat and risk to have even a shot of creating opportunities. Don't forget, they did not create much against City in the League Cup final other than that first couple of chances with Havertz when Subimendi played him in. And it was perhaps a bit too early in the game, so to speak, but they didn't create much against Sporting away. They didn't create much against Sporting at home. They did not create much at Bournemouth home. And you're now going to the home of Manchester City and thinking, oh, all of a sudden we're going to be playing like prime Barcelona. I don't see it. So, look, from my perspective, I think they've got their work cut out. But as per the Al Pacino movie, any given Sunday, it's a game of football, and you never know how
Mm.
it's going to go. So I think they are underdogs for the day. I think that's pretty clear. I think if they had Saka, I'd say, look, they've got a threat somewhere. They can create certain situations, and it's definitely obviously a must-win more for City than it is Arsenal. Let's be very clear. That's what the facts tell you. That's what the numbers tell you. So yeah, look, I think it's a huge game. Tactically, it'll be fascinating. I think the occasion will be huge. I think Etihad will be absolutely bouncing. But again, I've said for the longest time, where you just before you go, that Arsenal, I believe, have to win there. And I think injuries and no injuries, whether it's lucky or whatever it may be, they need to go to that stadium and find a way to stand up and win. And that's what they'll be remembered for. I think if they win, they've got one hand for me on the Premier League title. And I think that's the opportunity that presents itself for Arsenal right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's the way that Arteta's going to be looking at it. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that is the way that he should be looking at it. He should be looking at going to the Etihad and saying, right, we're going there to win the game. I mean, I'd almost sort of say that starting Max Dowman would be a stroke of genius. And the reason why I would say that is that it sort of it gives a signal because he's an offensive player, and it's an extremely brave inclusion, which perhaps it might sort of resonate, might just filter across. And he's somebody that I think is quite an infectious guy. I think when you've got a young kid, I don't know whether it sort of has that sort of effect that it just sort of it lifts everybody on the pitch as well, especially if he does a piece of magic, which he's more than capable of doing. Because I subscribe to that philosophy. If you're good enough, you're old enough. I certainly think he's good enough, and I think he's good enough to cause problems, and that's really what you want to try and do. How do you try and sort of win a game against Man City, causing problems? Not defensively, it's offensively, and Max Darwin is one of the better players that you've got. But it really is. It's set up to be a magnificent game. As I said, I'm not sure whether it's going to be a great spectacle, but I think there's just going to be so much interest, so much drama within the game, irrespective of whether it's a good technical game or a good free-flowing game. It's going to always be exciting to watch. Right, just on that, I mean, I said it at the start.
Yeah.
Uh, if it happens that Arteta sort of loses this game and he ends up sort of not winning the league, and he doesn't win the Champions League. I mean, I've said it sort of many times previously where he's just not won anything, so he has to go. Sometimes it's tongue in cheek, sometimes it is serious. I do say that ultimately, a coach, especially a coach of a squad with the caliber and the quality that he has. For the years that he's had, for the number of years that he's had, you have to have an end result. I mean, in business, there is a KPI. Ultimately, if you don't deliver, uh, there are questions asked, and sometimes it's your job is on the line, and sometimes maybe you're asked to leave. Uh, would you, after this season, if Liverpool, if Arsenal end up empty-handed, considering the position they've been in, considering the style and the strength of football they've played, would you still say that you continue with Arteta, or do you really now sort of think that maybe, perhaps, it is time for a change because for whatever reasons, he can't get over the line?
Honestly, the thought hasn't crossed my mind, to be honest with you. I don't even think about it. The fact that
Or maybe
Mikel
you should.
Arteta, Perhaps, but maybe therein lies the difference between you and I. But yeah, look, I mean, I don't, and that's not because I look. It might be something to do with. Honestly, I think it might be something to do with age or just general maturity or what have you. I don't think, as an Arsenal fan, I don't think you can be as self-entitled or righteous enough to suggest as though you deserve to win the league and you should be there winning the league and we have a right to win the league. We haven't dominated this. We haven't dominated English football in terms of, and I'm talking eras of dominance and what have you. At least in my lifetime, yes, they've won titles, but they never went back to back under Wenger. They didn't win the Champions League when arguably they had a team that was befitting and capable of doing so. So we're not talking about a club that's consistently, let's say, at the very, very, very pinnacle of football and defining eras and decades. I mean, yes, they've won stuff, and they're one of the biggest clubs in the world. Let's not. I'm not suggesting that they're not, but we're not talking Liverpool in the 80s or United under Ferguson over 2 decades, or maybe perhaps this City years or even the Klopp years or what have you. They haven't had that level of success, and the reason why it doesn't cross my mind, Ayub, and I'm being as honest as I can be, is because I can judge it from a lens of ultimately not just from where we've come, because I've lived through all those years. I've lived through the apathy, the ridicule, the idea that Arsenal again were a soft touch. And yes, they've got questions to answer right now, but they're not the teams that they were before when they were kind of finishing fifth and sixth and all the rest of it. Mikel Arteta took over a team, Ayub, that was a shambles, that fired Unai Emery. He had many a difficult year. He's probably turned over a couple of squads in that time as well. But there's no doubting what he's built at that football club. And I think people just assume that's taken for granted that, oh, he spent a bunch of money, which is why he should be winning trophies. Fair. And I think money brings you talent. Talent should win you games. Enough games won should mean trophies. That's fair. That's a logical chain of thought and what have you. But ultimately, I would argue the first part of winning is competing, and they are right there. They're on the cusp of doing something magical. Now, I actually think that it's actually more likely than not that they don't win a trophy this season. I actually do believe that because I don't think they're at the level of what you saw between Real and Bayern triumphing, and then obviously what PSG did to Liverpool at Anfield. I don't think Arsenal are at that level. I don't even think early on this season Arsenal were at the level that those two teams are exhibiting right now, especially in terms of offensive output. I could make the claim, Ayub, that those two teams actually boast the best front six that Europe ultimately has to offer in Kvaratskhelia, Dembele, and Doué, and then you've got obviously Elise, Diaz, and Kane for Bayern. Well, it should be a final. It's going to be a semi-final. But look, I just think from an Arsenal perspective, Ayub, Mikel Arteta, has he made mistakes? Of course he has. It's his first gig. I wouldn't expect kind of perfection and all the rest of it. But what he's built at that football club, I don't take for granted. I really don't. And the fact that we had years of going into big games and thinking, yeah, you're going to lose these. Not lose, you were getting smacked. And he's been on the side of a few hidings as well. Let's not get it twisted. But I think on the one hand, from a rational perspective, I still don't believe it'd be the right decision. Actually, I would be bitterly disappointed, and I'm not sure how I'd feel if Arsenal ever parted ways with Mikel Arteta, at least not in the immediate short term, mid term. He's our manager. I absolutely love what he's done with that football club. I think he deserves to win. I think he puts in the graft, he puts in the hours. I think he's incredibly intense. He wants it. Does he make mistakes? Yes, he does, but that's human beings for you. And I told you last time, there is a romantic sentiment for me in terms of wanting him to be there at the end when Arsenal do lift some trophy. I don't think I'd feel the same if it was another manager. I really don't. And I think that's just investment that you have. Some might say that's wrong, but football, it does tug at the heartstrings. It does tug. It is not just, I think you've spoken about this very well in previous times. Football, not only is it entertainment, I mean, Ant and Deck's entertainment on a Saturday night, but sport lives in its own sphere. It lives in its own universe. It has its own set of rules that society, in a sense, kind of interacts with when it comes to sports. It's why I love sports and many sports at that. There is something unique about sports where you follow the protagonist and you get invested with, the relevant kind of people within it. You mentioned it earlier about how the UK is kind of following the game. Sky Sports, the build up, the stories, the personnel. You'll get the big interviews with Haaland on one side and maybe Saliba on the other, and it gets built up, and you become super invested, and you get an insight into these players' lives and these managers' lives and all the rest of it, and you really want to, in some ways, to do well, because I think Arsenal, respectfully, I think they're a good bunch. You don't hear too much negativity coming out of them in terms of negative stories and all the rest of it, and what have you. I think Arteta is an incredibly great manager, but yeah, management at the highest level in professional sports is validated by winning trophies, and there's no getting away from that. So look, I think he's an incredible manager. I really do. Even now, when I think about potentially not winning the Premier League, would it hurt? Of course it would. It's going to hurt him more than anybody else, though, and that's the difference. The question is, you can hold him accountable. That's fair. He gets paid a lot of money to be held accountable. But you can't tell me for the life of me that that manager does not care about winning or not winning for Arsenal Football Club. And I think I can connect with that. I can resonate with that. And yes, again, has he got to make some improvements? Does he have some blind spots? Yes, he does. But I think he's a damn good coach as well. This idea that you can replace him with somebody who comes in and provides that additional 5%, that's been proven to be, well, proven not to be the case in many, many situations. There's no guarantee that there's a manager that comes in, either rubs up the players the wrong way, rubs up the fans the wrong way, doesn't have the tactical acumen, doesn't have the connection. And you know this. It helps that he's got a connection with the Arsenal fans. It helps that he was an Arsenal football player. It helps that Arsenal perhaps weren't as successful in the times before he came along. So the bar was set very low, let's say. So maybe perhaps fans are settling. But I just think when I hear certain fans, especially on social media, and it's not the right, kind of forums or what have you, I think it's just entitled fans. It's just my opinion. I don't think it's a case of, oh, we deserve better, or these players don't want it. I told you these players want it too much. I would argue they want it too badly. And this idea also that he's not necessarily toning down the talk with the fire and kind of perhaps overly dramatizing it. I think it's a nonsense, because first question Eze was asked in his pre-match press conference in Champions League was about this, and he had to bat it down. And the post-match discussions with Declan Rice, I think, with the TV channels talking about, oh, do you care about how you appeared? And so it's a constant discussion about the state of where Arsenal are, about what the games that they're about to play. I don't think there's any getting away from it. I don't think he can ignore it. The best players and the best teams, Ayub, as you know, take the pressure head on, embrace it, and those who can perform in the heat of battle, when the pressure is at its highest, is what differentiates the good and the great ultimately. And I think Arsenal, in that sense, still have a great opportunity. If it doesn't go their way on Sunday, and if it doesn't go their way come end of May, of course, it'll be a super long summer. It'll be perhaps a very broken summer in some ways for a lot of those players in terms of what they were setting out to achieve, or what they'd hoped to achieve, and not ultimately fulfilling that objective. I don't think you're looking at some overpaid prima donnas. I think you're looking at a group that's desperate to win, that really wants to win, and again, perhaps wants to win too much. Perhaps that is what's throttling their creativity and, in a sense, their kind of freedom of expression right now. So, look, I think he's just an incredible manager. Your final word. I would not remotely even consider. I would reward him with another contract. I believe he will be the guy to win with Arsenal. And like I said, selfishly, subjectively, whatever it may be, I want him to be the one when Arsenal finally do land the Premier League title.
Well, it'll be interesting to actually see if that is if that is the case, where if he doesn't win anything this year, what the board will decide. Because I don't think there's any question about the commitment, the application, the attitude. Maybe there's just a question mark about, I suppose, the philosophy he's got. Maybe that sort of conservatism. Maybe that's stunting potentially what this team is capable of doing. And is that concept in sports, isn't it? It's, I mean, to use sort of a cricketing example, there was two players that, I mean, you're aware of, I'm aware of, who in another lifetime would have been superstars, Mark Ramprakash and Graham Hick. But there was this, I mean, I suppose they had some mental frailties, but again, it's fear of not sort of performing. And I don't know whether that's almost something that Arteta has, that there's this fear which is so sort of it almost handicaps him, that he sort of rather than sort of being expansive, being brave, he sort of goes into his shell and plays in a conservative manner. I mean, when we talk about sort of Graham Hick and Mark Ramprash, I mean, these were sort of cricketers who had fabulous careers in terms of first class professional careers. They scored lots of runs. Both of them averaged 50 plus first class cricket, but when it mattered, they never produced. And maybe it was the fear because both of them were quite sort of characters who perhaps couldn't cope with the expectation. And maybe if they'd flipped it around and said, right, it doesn't really matter. I mean, Kevin Peterson was completely the opposite. He was very brave. In terms of technical ability, I don't think there was much difference between those sort of players that I've mentioned, but his attitude was right because he always went in to take on the opposition. And maybe if Arteta has that sort of mindset where he says, right, I'm going to be on the front foot, I'm going to let them answer the questions. I would personally would say if he doesn't win anything, and it's not a slight on Arteta. I wouldn't sort of say that's a question mark about his coaching ability. I think as a coach, you're absolutely right. This is a first class, outstanding coach, but it's the mindset. I think there is something fundamentally conservative, which is perhaps it's almost debilitating, where
Mm.
he's when it matters. He's not able to sort of express himself, go on the front foot, and it's for that reason. Maybe he just perhaps is not the mindset that you need. But we'll sort of see when the season sort of pans out. Right.
Well,
Before we go, I just want to, it's a random topic, but I just want to sort of ask you in terms of this season. I mean, for me, it's been a fabulous season. It's been a really enjoyable, exciting season. So I want to just ask you, is there any player in the Premier League that stood out for you, and why? What's the reasons for that player to sort of stand out, and maybe he's going to be an even bigger star in the coming years? So go on, take it away.
it's interesting how you framed your question because we didn't discuss this in terms of the players that we're thinking about. But given that you said just there at the end that he could be a good player for years, I'm imagining your players perhaps a bit younger than mine is. Look, when you asked this question beforehand in terms of okay, let's discuss this as a topic. The reason we discussed it is because we're coming to the end of the season. It's normally when a lot of the awards are handed out at you in terms of the individual awards. And I look, I think in terms of PFA Player of the Year or Premier League Player of the Year and all of that jazz, chances are that if Arsenal win the Premier League, you'd imagine it may well be one of the centre backs or Declan Rice or something along those lines. I'd be amazed if it was anybody else from the Arsenal fraternity. Equally, if Manchester City win the league and that seems to give them the pep. I mean, some of these votes happen a bit early, so that might,
Hmm.
in a sense, skew, let's say, what may well be the case because City have come on strong, haven't they? You, let's say, in the last
Hmm.
few months. But City you may look at it, Shirky, perhaps maybe too late in terms of the run. Semenyo been great for two football clubs this season. He's had an incredible season, if you ask me, a top footballer. But the player I'm going to go for, who I think you have to at least acknowledge that he's been one of the best players this season. It's not just about the goals that he's produced. It's not just about the assists he's produced. But in kind of American sports vernacular, they talk a lot about MVP, most valuable player. And it's about, well, if you take this player, that there's no real definition, but there's a lot of talk within kind of sports debate is that if you take that player out of that football team, kind of what happens to it in terms of
Hmm.
the impact that would leave. And I think in terms of the elevation of his game this season as well and his impact on the team, for me, one of the best, if I could say the best player that I've seen this season, and it's been a joy to watch, is Bruno Fernandes of Manchester United. I think he's got a good chance for PFA Player of the Year. He's got obviously a number of goals, 17 odd assists or something along those lines, could well break that 20 assist mark. I need to double check those assists. He got one obviously the other day, when you were obviously absolutely crestfallen, let's say that Leeds were going to do what Leeds were going to do, so to speak. But
Hmm.
across that, obviously, it travelled a
Yeah.
million miles from a Leeds perspective. But even so, that's quality that you get from Bruno
Hmm.
Fernandes. And I think what's really interesting to watch him now, Ayub, is for the longest time we've known the talent. There's been arguments about him being petulant. He obviously was made captain quite some time ago as well, but there was some talk about petulant situations, complaining to the referee, and he wasn't a very liked football. And I think what was one of the most frustrating things, especially when you heard people like Roy Keane rip him to shreds in many a talk show, and what have you. But what was perhaps frustrating was that there was always this talk about, well, oh, he's talented, but he's talented, but there was always this discussion because of some of the theatrics and all the constant complaining. And I think some of that has eroded with time and maturity. And I think we have to allow grace with any player in terms of that journey that they all go on. But he was also playing in a very poor Manchester United team. I think now, as Manchester United have improved in recent times, yes, they had a poor season last season, but this year has been massive. They are, I think, the only football team in the league, who've had an actual improvement when it comes to open play goals and what have you. Every other team in the league has had a regression when it comes to open play XG, I should say, which is perhaps a debate for another day in terms of such a skewed stat in terms of the erosion of open play expected goals. But anyway, I just think Ayub, now his talent speaking on the pitch. There's an arrogance with which he's carrying himself now, which is now being received much more favorably to the crowd or to the paying public or to the kind of neutral spectator. I think his football's a joy to watch. Ayub. His passing is second to none. I genuinely believe. I mean, there were some passes, if you remember, early on this season, Ayub, when they won against Man City at Old Trafford, which they then backed up with a defeat of Arsenal at the Emirates, if you remember. But some of his passing is just ridiculous. It's he'll try things that nobody else would try.
Yeah.
Volley passes, 45 yards, and he'll be on a six bunts onto the player's chest. And I'm just so happy for him. If you remember, we did this topic, I think last year, a couple of years ago, where we spoke about most improved player, and I think I went for Joe Linton. I think you even kind of agreed that we said, oh, his start of his Newcastle career and what he's now become in terms of this kind of colossus in midfield, an absolute athletic beast as he was in those years for Newcastle. I feel a bit similarly for Fernandes on a very different arc. Obviously, he's a much more renowned player than Joe Linton, but the journey is pretty much the same. This idea of a mercurial talent, good player, but often very theatrical, not letting his talents come to the fore. Poor team, but he's not necessarily raising the team's levels by dragging them up. You now look at that team and think, I mean, I've said it with a few friends recently. If Arsenal had Bruno Fernandes, they're winning this league. It's as simple as that. He's
Yeah.
that good a footballer. So I just think this season, the numbers, the arrogance, the passing, also doing his passing in the flow of the game. Are you? You'll see that he's not necessarily just doing things just to get oohs and ahs from the crowd. He's doing it in the flow of the game and creating absolute havoc. United have created a lot of opportunities, created a lot of situations, and he's very much at the center of that. Does it help now that he's got really good offensive options in Embuemo and Sesko and Cunha and even Diallo, and perhaps got a little bit more of a stronger base behind him, perhaps. But for me, he's an incredible footballer. I think he's in with a shout for PFA Player of the Year. I think he'll probably end up with one of the two clubs that may well be winning the title. But I'm just glad, at least from his side, that he's had now a year, and maybe perhaps we'll go on to have another year or two as he's advancing. I think he's 31 in age, to still have some big seasons in the Premier League. What's his record? I think he's breached the 100 goals, 100 assists for United, which has not been breached by many, just a handful. So he's written himself, I would say, somewhat as a United legend. He'd probably want to back that up with a big trophy, of course, to cement his status within the icons of Manchester United, who've had incredible players all the way going back to the 60s and 50s and what have you. But yeah, he would be my pick in terms of just that level that he's hit this season, which I don't think offensively many players have hit this year. So he would be my pick.
Can't argue with that. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, he's an outstanding player. He's been an outstanding player for a long time, but I think the consistency is something separate. I think he works damn hard as well. If you look at his stats,
Yep.
and I think maybe perhaps it was his histrionics, which
Yeah.
sometimes took away from obviously how good a player he is. But if you watch him, he's just an absolutely special player. But you were right when I sort of mentioned it. I said about future as well, and the player that I'm going to pick, who I mean, Fernandes, you're right. I mean, in terms of if you had to pick the best midfielder, it probably would be Fernandes. But I'm going to go for another midfielder who I think has been outstanding this season, but I think he's going to get better and better. I think he's somebody that every time that I've watched him, and he's been playing in a struggling side, albeit they've sort of picked up now, but he's been outstanding. He sort of reminds me of KDB. He isn't sort of like KDB, but there is something about him that reminds me of KDB. KDB to me almost encapsulated the perfect midfield player. He had bags of energy. He was good on the ball. He sort of defensively he was sound. He had a great engine. He was forward, sort of always forward thinking. And my guy is he's a young player. He's 23 years of age. He's Elliot Anderson at Nottingham Forest. I mean, I've watched sort of Elliot Anderson a number of times because obviously it's a team that's sort of at the bottom, and I always like to keep an eye on what's happening at the bottom. But he's always been outstanding. He is to me a footballer who's got all the attributes needed, and I think the key attribute that he does have is the mindset, the mentality. I think he's somebody that wants to get better. He's very hungry. Sort of there's sort of that Gerrard-esque sort of enthusiasm, and which is what you need to be a player who's going to have longevity in this league. He will be courted by bigger teams. I think there
Yeah.
is rumor that Man City are sort of keeping tabs on him because I think City are much improved since January. But if there is a player that they're missing, is KDB. Now, this is not a like for like replacement, but this is a player that perhaps at least sort of has certain elements of KDB's game which will help because he is somebody that has stood out in a struggling team. And albeit they are playing slightly better, and obviously have had a good run in the European Cup. But he's my sort of player of the season. I think he's an outstanding talent, and there will be a lot of interest. I think certainly from the bigger clubs. I'm sure Manchester United will be interested.
Yeah.
I know that Man City are interested, and I'm sure there are other clubs in the top 4 or 5 that will be after this guy, and it'll be worth a lot of money because that sort of player does sort of command a big fee. So he's my sort of player of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, he's getting rave reviews. It feels a little bit, although obviously a much shorter time frame, in a sense that he's about to go on the ascent that Declan Rice did a little bit. Now, Declan Rice was much more established at West Ham in terms of came through at a very young age and it became quite the important player for them. He's not Elliot Anderson, obviously was at Newcastle. He's not played for Forest in a sense anywhere near as long as Declan Rice, but it feels that type of player, that type of story, that type of personnel that he's about to go on that ascent and that journey of where he becomes one of the very best. You're right. When I read a lot of what people have said about him, I think it was just interesting when even when you see, I don't know if you saw the interview with Morgan Gibbs White after the game yesterday in the Europa League or the
Mm,
Conference League or what have you. And obviously Elliot Anderson lost a parent this week, so he wasn't there for the game. But even Morgan Gibbs White was breaking down in the interview, so it gives you a little bit of an idea
mm,
of, I guess, a reflection on Morgan Gibbs White and his kind of empathy and what have you, but a little bit of the connection. He talks about how he's just a really good boy
mm.
and what have you. So a very sad time for him and his family. But in terms of his footballer, Europe top player, will be going
Yeah.
to the World Cup. Will he start? Is a big question. You saw his contribution, obviously, with that long range strike at the Etihad, much to the delight at the time of Arsenal fans and what have you. But he's a top footballer. I think he could start with Declan Rice. I think he could go on to be that type of player. And he looks, Ayub, I don't know if you agree, he looks armed with, like you said, that mentality of I can be something. Like I can
Yeah.
stand here toe to toe. He's not some sort of sheepish central midfielder who's happy just to keep things simple. No, he can
Mm,
make the difference. He can influence. I think there was a statistic early on this season about Ayub how he'd made the most kind of progressive passes or open play passes and what have you going forward and what have you. So yeah, incredible pick. You're right. He's moving on this summer. Let's be very clear. I think chances are he will end up in Manchester somewhere if rumours are to be believed, but he'd be an incredible pickup for anybody. And you're right, it's going to take probably north of 80, 85 million
mm.
to get him, not least if he has a very successful World Cup with England. Just very quickly, just to finish off, I'm going to give you 5 minutes very quickly about the Leeds game. It would be remiss if I didn't, but just very quickly before we do, just to close the first topic, how do you see it on Sunday? What's your prediction?
In terms of what the Leeds game?
No, forget the Leeds game. Nobody cares about the Leeds game. Are you the big game on Sunday?
I think it's going to be tight, but I think City will win by the odd goal, so maybe sort of 2-1. I'll call it 2-1.
Yeah, you're gonna laugh, but I think City will turn them over, and I think when I look at Arsenal and what I saw in the League Cup and what I've seen from this City team, everything tells me that they're going to win comfortably.
Mm,
I don't see it with Arsenal in terms of just being able to get out. They don't have speed on the transition. They don't have the ability to get out consistently. City know how to play against them, and they're beating them, and they're the better team right now. And it's at home. I can't point to one thing. There's not one
mm.
aspect. They've got the managerial experience. They know what it takes in April. Their numbers in April and May are incredible, by the way.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. I think Arsenal will get turned over fairly comfortably. Now, switching topics, Ayub, to a topic that only you care about, obviously. Leeds at home to Wolves, I believe. Now, you've done the hard work. Huge game on Monday night that you won. Obviously, we shot after that. You were absolutely delighted. You'd already watched the game, highlights for I think 50 times, and then you went to watch
Mm,
it perhaps another 50 times. But home to Wolves, this is where you've got to cash in, haven't you, Ayub? So
mm.
where do you see it? If you win this game, Ayub, surely you will feel very, very confident, especially with Spurs, I think, playing in the 8 o'clock game here, so about 5 o'clock or
5:30,
5:30
yeah.
over
Yeah,
there,
5:30.
over there.
Yeah.
How do you see it for Leeds against Wolves? Must win, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, I mean it's again we talked about when we talk about the Arsenal, about mentality, about mindsets, about sort of are you looking forward to it, are you afraid? And really the players should be sort of chomping at the bit. If we play anything like we did in that first 45 minutes, then I expect us to get a good positive result.
Oh yeah,
It's one where but we are sort of near the bottom for a reason because we don't have the consistency. We don't win that many games, so there is that sort of apprehension, that sort of nervousness, certainly from my part. I mean, it's a huge game, and I think the it's a game that I think the players are aware the magnitude of the game, and they're probably aware that if we win this game, if we get 3 points, it virtually means that we are safe. But maybe therein lies the problem because of the 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 enormity of this game. Because we've got this game and then we play away against Bournemouth, where that's a very very tough team to play, especially at their home. So this is if we get 3 points, uh, I I think I mean I won't go as far as sort of saying that we've done it, but we're not far away. But again, the mindset I'm going to look at the mindset of that team, and a lot of times they've answered the question, but a lot
yeah,
of times they haven't answered the questions by late concessions because we are top of the table in terms of conceding after 90 minutes, which sort of exposes a mental fragility. And that's always been something that I've said about this Leeds side over a number of years, where sort of we're okay, we'll fight, we'll battle, but in key moments, when you need strong minds and strong hearts and strong wills, we sort of fold a little bit. And I'm just hoping that's not the case tomorrow. But it's a huge game. I mean, I think we talked obviously about Man City and Arsenal. I think
mm.
for us, it's equivalent in terms of the magnitude of how important this game is. So I can't call it though. I can't call it. I mean, I'm nervous now. I'm going to be absolutely a wreck tomorrow. But I hope come sort of 5 o'clock that I'll be absolutely delighted. And the result against Man United will be something that I'm not looking back and thinking, what was the point? Because that's what I don't want. Because that was always my fear. That there's no point winning against Manchester United and then sort of not sort of following up and getting a result against Wolves. But it's exciting. This is what we sort of sign up to when we sort of
Yeah.
follow football, and this is certainly what I signed up to, sort of following Leeds United. So really exciting times, but nerve-wracking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. I mean, you've got your Friday white on, representative of Jumma Day, but also Leeds United Football Club. But no, look, I think you're going to be. I think you're going to be fine. My eyes tell me that Leeds are a decent outfit. Now they're a decent outfit, bereft of some key talent. Now that's why they're
Mm,
at the bottom. But in
yeah.
terms of all the other things you can control, i.e., working hard, attitude, grafting, working for one another. I don't think you can fault Leeds this season. I absolutely, I don't.
Mm. Oh yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
actually, I think from a You think about Leeds United Football Club in your time, where you've been the last 5, 10 years, and think about how many times you felt bloody hell they've shortchanged the fans there in terms of just
Mm.
not turning up, not having the right attitude, players not committed. He's built a very committed outfit, and
Yeah,
that will make up for a lot of you in terms of talent. Now, it won't win you the title, it won't get into Champions
yeah,
League spots, it won't even get you to mid-table. But what it can get you is being competitive in the games, and which is what they have been under Daniel Farke this season. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be cock a hoop. I think the crowd will be buzzing. I think the ground will be buzzing. Leeds have, I don't know if you agree with this, but generally at home, against teams where you think, I mean, I even remember the Sunderland game, which obviously you were very disappointed in, but they'll always start well. And it's a key of whether or not they can score. If you remember, they had a big chance against
mm.
City as well.
Yeah,
Dominic
yeah,
Calvert-Lewin with that chance when he should have scored past Donnarumma. But they'll always start well. And I think if they can get a goal, the crowd's going to be absolutely electric, isn't it, Ayub? So I think it'll
yeah,
be fine. I think a win on I think you play on Saturday. A win on Saturday afternoon, and then a Spurs draw at
yeah.
home to Brighton, and I think you'll be feeling absolutely confident. But yeah, we shall see. Huge weekend of football, Europe. It's interesting. You're an absolute wreck, and you're playing home to a team that's pretty much relegated. We're going away to Manchester City in a game that's going to define futures and define legacies and all the rest of it. And I'm kind of looking forward to it. So let's see. Let's see.
All right, sums our characters up. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
As always, a pleasure to speak with you. And we'll catch up and do a post-mortem. Hopefully, it's a pleasant post-mortem
You won't
on
find
Monday.
me. You won't find me on Monday.
All right, okay. Great to speak to you. And as always, a pleasure to have you join us. So until the next time, stay safe. Enjoy the weekend. See you soon. Ta-da.